Not just numbers, as horrific as those numbers are, but the faces of the victims, a scandal of unprecedented proportions. The infected, the affected, those who have died. And among them Brian Brierley, who died in 1991.
That's me and that's my brother.
Pictured here with his two sons.
That'd probably be about 84. He was 49 when he died. And I often wonder what he'd be like now, you know, or at my age. But yeah, strange.
Brian had haemophilia B, a type of blood clotting disorder. From the mid to late 70s, he was treated with a concentrate made from pooled blood plasma.
Obviously, these factorates that came through in the 70s and 80s were seen as a kind of way to, you know, give them mobility and freedom. You know, all of a sudden we could go on holidays abroad because obviously you could self-inject at home.
Brian was treated with factor IX, produced in the UK, but from donors including high-risk groups like prisoners. By the early to mid-80s, it was clear HIV was already in the UK blood supply.
In, I think it was mid-85, he asked for an HIV test. Reluctantly, they gave him the HIV test, and it came back positive. Obviously, his whole world fell apart at that point, and my mum's. And they decided not to tell me or my brother about this. They decided to keep it to themselves. He died 6 years later from complications caused by HIV/AIDS, and we were told the day after he died what he died of.
But the largest majority of people infected received what is called factor VIII.
Factor VIII is literally a lifesaver for many of the country's 5,000 or so haemophiliacs. It replaces the missing clotting agent in their blood.
Largely imported from America, factor VIII was made up of pooled plasma donations from high-risk drug users and prisoners. But just one sample with HIV or hepatitis could infect the entire batch. On Monday in this hall, the Infected Blood Inquiry will finally release its report. And it is hoped, it is expected that it will get to the truth of what happened. Of course, this is against a background of thousands of documents and records which have gone missing, of people who were involved having died. And yet at the same time, so many documents and so many records have been found and placed into the inquiry. And what they show conclusively is that repeated warnings about factor VIII were ignored. Like this 1983 memo to the UK government from the human rights organisation, the Council of Europe. In it, it recommends avoiding the importation of blood plasma from countries with high-risk populations and paid donors, to avoid wherever possible the use of factor products prepared from large plasma pools, and to inform attending physicians and selected recipients such as haemophiliacs of the potential health hazards. The response written by a civil servant was to downplay this, recommending appropriate precautions are taken in the preparation of certain blood products, and that specific groups of recipients such as haemophiliacs are accordingly reassured. It was another 2 years before the contaminated products started to be phased out.
I do think there was this feeling within the civil service, this wishful thinking that this problem would somehow just go away or take care of itself. And it was that approach which, while that might work with other policy areas, here, where people were at risk from a 100% lethal virus, there were only two ways that was going to take care of itself, and that was by taking action to prevent it, or everyone dies. And unfortunately, we got very close to the latter option.
Underlying the stories that the victims and their families have to tell is this one word: secrecy. There was shame and stigma.
Finding out the day after he died what they'd been through, at the time I was quite angry because I felt I should have been told, I deserved to know. But as I've got older and as I've had kids myself, I really understand it, and I really appreciate what they did for us in keeping it from us, because I'd left university and started a career in London in journalism, and they knew that if I knew, I would have gone back and wanted to be with him.
This is years of grief, often contained, now spilling over, and mixed with so many other emotions.
The anger isn't really about what's happened to them. Obviously there's a kind of, there's a whole thing about processing grief. But it's what's happened since. It's the lies and the cover-ups and the fact that this will happen again if people aren't held to account.
For Sean and all the families, there will be so many questions answered on Monday. But will it be enough for those infected and affected?